Sonic Frontiers presents a bold new direction for the much maligned Sonic franchise. As the first Sonic game in 5 years, there was a lot riding on this. Was the wait worth it, or was it another disappointment? In this video, I'll be sharing what I liked and disliked about the game. I played the PlayStation 4 version, and this will be a spoiler-free review. I've broken this review up into sections, so feel free to skip to the section that interests you, and turn on 2x speed to get through it faster. So, let's jump right into it. Heading to the desolate Starfall Islands to investigate the Chaos Emerald's sudden resurgence there, Sonic and friends are suddenly pulled into a wormhole en route. Only Sonic makes it out while his pals are trapped in a digital dimension, cyberspace. Meanwhile, while running simulations with his new AI companion Sage, Dr. Eggman is also trapped in cyberspace and sends Sage into the real world to antagonize Sonic. Will Sonic free his friends from cyberspace, discover the mystery behind Starfall Island's mysteriously vanished ancient civilization, and defeat the true enemy behind it all? The answer is of course yes. This is as simple as it gets in Sonic games, and it's a straightforward but intriguing enough setup for the game. I actually enjoyed jumping in and out of the real world and cyberspace, discovering ancient ruins, and coming across the mysterious but cute little island inhabitants, the Coco. There's enough world building and intrigue here to lay a foundation for a game of this scale. However, the way the narrative is told has innumerable problems. This game has a lot of cutscenes, and these cutscenes are just scenes of characters standing around, talking, and discussing events. There's no momentum to them at all, and whenever I reached a cutscene, I would groan at having to stop gameplay to listen to their dull conversations. Cutscenes should be a reward for overcoming game challenges, not a punishment. It's a backward step in storytelling from the previous game Sonic Forces, in which dialogue would be fed to you while navigating levels. The stop-and-start nature of storytelling in this game does not come off as mature, just boring. This is connected to the tone of the game, which is more somber and morose than Sonic has ever been. While Forces experimented with this with that game's post-apocalyptic setting, this game leans hard into a serious, far less goofy and less playful tone. Clearly this game was inspired by Breath of the Wild and Death Stranding, and not only did they take influence from those games' gameplay, but storytelling too. Sonic is thrown into an empty environment with no one to interact with, which is incredibly unexciting. Without spoiling too much, there are a few moments in the story that came close to making me feel something, but it was just not enough, with far too much padding in the middle. An early example is when Amy charges Sonic with reuniting two star-crossed Coco. While the Coco are cute, this had absolutely no emotional impact on me. Why should we as a player care about this? It's just plodding and unnecessary. Another weird decision is shoehorning references to previous Sonic games into the story. And not just simple callbacks, but references to oddly specific moments that even the most well-versed of Sonic lore experts will have trouble recalling. Does anyone in 2022 have nostalgia for that one time Tails interacted with the Sinister Six in the 2013 game Sonic Lost World for the Wii U? Clearly, Sonic Team overestimates the knowledge and love the consumer has for their franchise, which suggests vanity and lack of self-awareness on their part. It is not comparable to a game like Super Mario Odyssey's references to Super Mario Bros. Super Mario Bros. Is a beloved, recognizable, and readily available game, whereas games like Sonic Lost World and Unleashed are not. A wholly unnecessary inclusion in Frontiers, which will most likely just confuse players young and old. Without spoiling the ending, a key dynamic between two characters changes, and I wonder if future games in the series will reflect this. Doubtful, but I'm still curious to see where Sonic games will go from here. While overall the story had some intrigue and attempts at taking Sonic in a new direction, it was still nothing special or memorable. Sonic is the only playable character this time around, but having other playable characters would be unnecessary. Sonic is still his usual self, albeit a little more restrained this time around to match the game's tone. He's been given a more restrained vocal performance, which in my opinion makes him a less enjoyable personality. Tails, Amy, Knuckles, and Dr. Eggman return, and provide Sonic with goals and motivation in his quest. They serve to either support or antagonize him, and don't do much else. Their characterization is the same as it has always been, with Tails and Amy as lovable sidekicks, Knuckles with his friendly rivalry to Sonic, and Eggman up to his usual scheming and silliness. New character Sage provides a bit more intrigue. She's an AI created by Dr. Eggman, who is charged with busting him out of cyberspace and stopping Sonic's progress. She does more of the emotional heavy lifting in the story, evaluating Sonic and Eggman's dynamic from an outsider's perspective, while gradually forming her own emotional judgments as events in the story unfold. She's an interesting enough presence, but she is done dirty by the plot, which should have given her more agency and a more important role. She is still just Eggman's instrument after all. well. A real wasted opportunity. The Coco are the inhabitants of the Starfall Islands and are connected to the mysteriously vanished ancients. I loved these little guys, very cute and playful that added a bit of brevity to the overly serious tone. These guys will probably be made into merch, which will certainly sell successfully. They don't have much to do with the story, but are a fun and welcome presence. The enemies of the game are slick robots, with mid-bosses known as Guardians, and giant bosses known as Titans. I actually really love these designs, despite them having garnered a lot of criticism. I like that Sonic Team tried something completely new for enemy design this time, and it gives a unique identity to Frontiers as a whole. There's a real thrill when they appear in the game, especially the Titans. The enemies are some of the most memorable parts of the game, and I have nothing but praise for Sonic Team in trying something new here. The Starfall Islands are where you'll be running around in an open world. They include biomes such as forests, deserts, lakes, mountains, volcanoes and such. The usual platformer fare. Topographically, they're nice, with a variety of terrain and obstacles that are fun to navigate around. The world is full of rails, springs, loops, and the usual Sonic obstacles, which while fun to use, look a little ugly and weird in an open world environment. Rails just hanging in the air is usual in a platforming game, and has narrative justification for being there, but it still takes some getting used to visually. Aesthetically, these environments do the job, but apart from the occasional interesting landmark, they are sparse and unmemorable. This world is begging to have more visually distinct landmarks and characters, especially as it's hard to remember where you've been when everything looks the same. The cyberspace portions of the game are a mixed bag. The self-contained platforming levels have a glitchy, impossible architecture aesthetic which I dig, and narratively justify defying gravity and making impossible jumps. However, a lot of these levels remix previous Sonic game levels. The very first cyberspace section is a remix Green Hill Zone stage. How many times do we need to see Green Hill Zone at this point? It continues to show up in every Sonic game, and it's getting really tiresome. It must be mandated by Sega at this point. In a cyberspace world where literally anything is possible, it's disappointing the designers defaulted to a familiar aesthetic instead of pushing their creativity. However, other levels look incredible, with a later highway-themed one a standout. I would have loved more of this and less of the same old same old. Overall, Frontiers environments are pleasant and serve the gameplay well, with some blandness here and there. A huge improvement over the hideous environments of Sonic Forces. Gameplay is where this game really shines. Finally, Sonic Team has tried something new with Sonic, and it is wonderful to behold. Running around the open world, or open zone as they call it, is fun, fast, and refreshing. Not only will you run across the world, but vertically too, climbing and navigating platform challenges. Sonic has new combat abilities too. The Psyloop skill makes a trail behind Sonic, which is used to stun enemies and solve puzzles. Sonic has a variety of punches, kicks, stomps, and projectile attacks too, taking inspiration from action games like Devil May Cry. It's an excellent choice and makes beating up enemies so much more enjoyable than just the homing attack from prior games. It's so easy and satisfying to be immersed in the open zone, running around, beating up enemies, solving puzzles, and collecting items. Great stuff. Speaking of collectibles, this game is a collectathon. To progress the story, you'll need to collect portal gears from defeated enemies, to open portals to cyberspace levels, clear cyberspace levels to get vault keys, use vault keys to get Chaos Emeralds, and collect all the Chaos Emeralds to challenge the area's final boss. At the same time, you'll have to collect memory tokens, which are randomly scattered in the open zone, to progress the narrative, as well as collect seeds and lost Coco to improve your top speed, ring capacity, attack, and defense. There's a lot of collectibles. A curious decision being that collectibles are infinite, meaning if you play enough, you'll acquire them naturally and progress the story. Furthermore, to map the open world, you'll need to solve simple environmental puzzles and challenges. Solving these challenges also unlocks navigational aid, with rail shortcuts beamed in from cyberspace to cut down travel time across the map. Powering up Sonic can be done by speaking to NPCs in the open zone. One character will power up your attack and defense to their highest possible level depending on how many seeds you have, while another powers up your speed or ring count when you hand over lost Cocos. The former is fast and efficient, while the latter requires you to manually increase speed and rings one level at a time. It's so slow and kills the pacing of the game. This should be more consistent. Sonic also has a skill tree accessed from the menu to get new moves by collecting skill points from combat, which is fine. I'm not a fan of skill trees or menu navigation, but it's fun unlocking skills as you go and as the difficulty of the game increases. Mid-bosses known as Guardians are really fun and creative to take down. You'll not just have to use combat, but Sonic's platform abilities too, such as rail grinding and wall running. It's really fun seeing how rails and such are integrated into boss design, and works really well and makes for some satisfying takedowns. Going one step further is the bosses, known as the Titans. These are colossal and fought as as Super Sonic. Super Sonic flies through the air and punches hard, and you'll need to parry and dodge the boss's attacks to kill them. These are exhilarating battles and the most memorable parts of the game, let down by a few moments of jank. As an example, in the battle against Giganto, the first boss, if you fly too close, Sonic will clip through him. It's disappointing and shows a lack of polish. Still, I can't stop thinking about these boss fights. Cyberspace sections of the game are highly inconsistent. These are self-contained levels reminiscent of previous Sonic games, and contain missions like beat under a certain time, or collect a certain number of rings. The 3D boost style ones are fun and fast-paced, and I really enjoyed going back to get the S-rank time. However, the 2D ones suck so much. You'll be going too fast and suddenly crash into a wall or spikes, killing momentum. Furthermore, the 2D controls are not as smooth as their 3D counterparts. I hated these 2D levels and was not motivated to replay them for the S-rank time. And it's a real shame seeing how 2D Sonic was perfected recently in Sonic Mania. Sonic Team could have taken some input from that game. Similarly, there are sections in the open zone where gameplay forcibly shifts to 2D for platforming sections. It's not always smooth, especially when you're suddenly running around and forced into a 2D section you can't escape from. One of the biggest disappointments about this game is forcing Sonic into 2D. It's wholly unnecessary and suggests Sonic Team rely too much on nostalgia rather than experimentation. 2D could have been left entirely out of this game, especially as the consumer is expecting a 3D open world game. Finally, there are some mini-games necessary to progress the story. Some of these are fun, like a box-destroying game, herding Cocos, or a Space Invaders style shooting game. Most of these are inoffensive and fun distractions, but there is an infuriating pinball section. Having a game of chance required to progress the story is a terrible decision, which infuriated me. No one should be forced to play pinball to progress the story, and this will no doubt infuriate the speedrunning community too. There's also an optional fishing minigame, which is a fun little distraction to get collectibles. I actually really liked the fishing minigame, and it's a nice little break from the high-speed chaos of the overall experience. Overall, the gameplay of Frontiers represents a monumental shift for the series. The new open zone platforming is a real improvement of Sonic gameplay, and I hope Sonic Team keeps ironing out the flaws in future installments. Apart from a few gripes and janky moments, Frontiers is fun, fast, and satisfying to play. Yikes. Not owning a PS5 and having heard of the issues that plague the Switch version, I opted for the PS4 version, which is fine. The frame rate is smooth and consistent, which is necessary for fast running and combat, but the texture and asset pop-in is laggy and ugly. You'll be running around the open zone when rails and platforms suddenly pop in. These assets aren't just off in the distance, but relatively close to Sonic's position. It can derail you from your intended route, as your previously thought to be obstacle-free path is suddenly full of them. While I love that loading screens between open zone and cyberspace sections have training challenges, there's little point of them when once exiting them, you're presented with another loading screen. Why not just have one? Thankfully, loading times aren't too long, but it's baffling to have a training screen and then a static loading screen. Other recent games like Bayonetta 3 don't do this and seamlessly transition from training to gameplay. I've not played the Switch version, but it looks like it has even more performance issues. If you have your hands on one, I'd go for the PS5 version. And that's really weird to say, as the Switch should be able to handle this game, and Sonic is best suited for that family-friendly console, but PS5 is definitely the way to go. Frontiers' soundtrack slaps hard, with bangers far and wide across the board. Music has always been a high point of the Sonic series, and this is no exception, and sets an even higher standard for the series. In the open zone areas, music is soft, morose, and orchestral. It's a surprising change of pace for the Sonic series, and matches the somber tone and desolate landscapes. The composition is excellent and fully orchestrated, and complements the natural landscapes beautifully. In cyberspace levels, you're treated to some excellent EDM. This also feels new for the Sonic series. The highly electronic composition complements the glitchy and impossible aesthetic of cyberspace, contrasts with the softer orchestral music of the open world, and includes a variety of genres, like drum and bass, dubstep, and hardstyle. The EDM is of such high quality that I could imagine it being played in European clubs. Nobody would be able to tell that it's game music. It really sounds like professional electronic music. And then there's the boss battle anthems. These are heavy metal anthems with vocals provided by professional musicians, from rock bands to Octavia and Sleeping with Demons, continuing the trend of hiring professional vocalists. These songs go hard and really complement the frenetic action of Supersonic facing off against Titanic bosses. The lyrics are empowering and intense and underscore the badassery of Supersonic. I could listen to these songs all day, especially I'm Here, the game's main theme. I cannot recommend these songs enough. Japanese J-rock gods One OK Rock have contributed their song Vandalize, albeit a censored version. It's a great song in its own right, however it's only used in the closing credits and its lyrics don't really match the themes of the game, so I can only conclude that it was thrown in for promotion. There's also a fun song, One Way Dream, contributed by YouTube singer Nate Wants to Battle. It's great to see Sega include a big part of the Sonic fandom in the game itself, and the song is pleasant and fun. It sits comfortably alongside previous uplifting Sonic anthems like Escape from the City, Endless Possibility, and Reach for the Stars. Series mainstays Crush 40 are nowhere to be found here. However, their music wouldn't really match the game's tone, and while I was disappointed at first they weren't here, the other elements of the soundtrack more than make up for it. Sonic Frontiers has possibly the best game soundtrack of the year. As for sound effects, the usual Sonic bouncing and rail grinding sounds are back, as is that annoying sound of him losing all his rings. Sound effects are nostalgic and effective, but considering how often you'll be hearing them, and depending on your experience with the Sonic franchise, you might get tired of hearing them. Finally, the voice acting has serious issues. Sonic's voice actor Roger Craig Smith is back as the hero, but surprisingly, his Sonic voice is now deeper than it's ever been. Moreover, it's a more restrained performance. Sonic is not as cheerful, upbeat, or in your face this time, and this applies to the other characters too. Tails, Amy, Knuckles, and Eggman have all been reined in. I don't think this is a problem with the actors, but their direction. I can only assume Sonic Team directed them to be more restrained in order to match the somber tone of the game. While I admire their intent, it's strange and betrays the characterization of these characters we've come to know over the past 20 years. It doesn't make the story more mature, it makes it more boring. The cutscenes are already dull, and the lack of personality the voices have makes it worse. I think this will bother a lot of long-term Sonic fans, and not help endear these characters to new fans. And rather stupidly, much hated character Big the Cat is back in charge of the fishing game, complete with his slow, annoying, and stupid voice. Every time you play the fishing minigame, you'll have to endure his tiresome and unskippable line, "Hey Sonic, would you like to try? I'll let you borrow a rod," multiple times. It's so bad that players will probably just avoid the fishing minigame altogether. Overall, the voice acting is a downgrade from previous games, which is a real shame. So, Sonic Frontiers represents a huge leap forward for the Sonic franchise, taking the series in a bold new direction. However, the game's narrative and performance shortcomings stop it from being truly great. Still, it's the best 3D Sonic has ever been and bodes well for the future of the franchise. This is the beginning of Sonic's redemption arc, as Sega and Sonic Team are finally starting to do right by their mascot. I really hope Sonic Team listen to player feedback and continue to refine this formula in future installments. Frontiers is well worth your time if you're already a Sonic fan, but if you're just curious about it, perhaps wait for a sale and then give it a go. So, have you played Sonic Frontiers, or are you still on the fence about it? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always, I'll be replying to every single comment, so please don't be shy. So if you found value in this review, please don't forget to leave a like for the algorithm. Next time, I'll be reviewing Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So if that interests you, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for listening to me ramble, have a good one, and I'll see you next time.